So, the other day I was rewatching Attack of the Clones and I was watching the Battle of Geonosis, and a thought crossed my mind. Wow, this battle is drastically different from every other engagement we see throughout the Clone Wars. So I figured today we could kind of dive into why this battle was a bit of a sloppy mess, and why both sides kind of stumbled their way through the Battle of Geonosis. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So before we begin, I want to throw out there that I'm actually not criticizing filmmaking or even writing here. I want to look at this from an in-universe perspective. I think all of the things that made Geonosis a bit of a sloppy mess make perfect sense in-universe, considering the situation these factions were in. But I do think it's definitely worth talking about. So let's start by defining what I mean by a sloppy mess. Well, at its core, this battle didn't even really need to happen. Both factions could have achieved their objectives through dominance of the battle space from above. The Republic forces caught Separatist forces completely off guard and could have simply bombarded their spaceships that were landed on Geonosis from orbit and avoided a major engagement altogether and probably achieved every strategic objective they had at this battle. But they didn't. And the Separatists could have blockaded the planet. The Republic ships were ultimately assault transports and not proper warships, where the Lucrehulk-class battleships in orbit were fairly formidable warships that were simply absent during the first half of the battle. Had they been present there in some sense, they could have been used to counter Republic forces, especially in the later stages of the battle. And that's not even talking about the ground combat, which saw mass formations of soldiers running across open ground at each other, firing wildly. Well, it does look pretty impressive on screen. It makes no sense from a tactical or strategic standpoint. So, exactly what happened here? Well, for starters, we have to talk about the galactic situation at the time. Stepping back a little bit more, and not just talking about the Separatist crisis, the galaxy has generally been at peace for a very, very long time. Hundreds, if not thousands of years. The Republic hadn't seen a major battle at all. Their military leadership had died out centuries ago, and anyone there to lead the clones would have had minimal battle experience. And I'm talking about the Jedi, who, well, they would have had experience in hand-to-hand combat and personal discipline. That's entirely different from leading troops on the battlefield, who need reasonable, sound orders, and the Jedi simply didn't have the experience of combat leadership or the training in combat leadership to actually properly lead an army. And mind you, they didn't even have a few days to prepare, to cram, to study. They were pulled from basically the battle at the arena and placed into the role of a battlefield commander with basically little preparation. So it's not surprising to me that the Jedi, who have no military training and were completely unprepared for a military engagement, suddenly put into the position of being military leaders, simply lead their troops in crazy frontal assaults that make no sense when you really think about it. The thing that's a little bit more baffling are the Separatists, who knew they had a massive army and were preparing to fight a massive war against what they thought would be a basically undefended enemy. Even if your leadership and commanding officers are aware that a military campaign is coming, they know the equipment and the soldiers, or in this case, battle droids, they're going to be deploying in that campaign, and have maybe even trained a little bit with handling and operating this equipment, they were expecting not even really a war. They were expecting to basically be able to march through to the core of the galaxy, nearly unopposed, facing small militias and local police forces, and nothing else. The Republic didn't have a standing military, so any force that they came up against was bound to be small compared to the mass of the droid army. But to suddenly be faced on the battlefield by an adversary with an army that they didn't know existed before the battle broke out would definitely be disorienting. Furthermore, they had no idea the capabilities of the Grand Army of the Republic, and were sort of left guessing through most of the battle. Furthermore, unlike the clones, which are individually valuable assets for the Republic, the battle droids were not. The battle droids were willingly and constantly throughout the Clone Wars marched on nearly suicidal full frontal assaults against fortified enemy positions. We see this time and time again throughout the entirety of the Clone Wars, basically all the way through to the end. Well, the sloppiness of the Separatists is less apparent and less excusable. It is still sort of there because they were caught off guard by the presence of the clone army, but it also is just kind of the way the Separatists operated. This led to the weirdly unique depiction of the Battle of Geonosis as this big open battlefield with two armies just kind of running at each other. This was solved pretty quickly, though. As the war dragged on and became more and more present, as those involved in the conflict began to really get a feel for what this conflict was going to be, and an idea for the scale of the forces they would be leading, leadership, particularly on the Republic side, improved substantially. Even by the Battle of Christophsis, not that long after the Battle of Geonosis, we see clone forces setting up defensive lines, taking cover, only advancing under covering fire, all these good things that help improve survivability of your forces on the battlefield, things that were nearly completely absent in the first Battle of Geonosis. So to round things out, the Battle of Geonosis really was a bit of a sloppy mess, primarily from the Republic side for very understandable reasons. Republic leadership was not used to leading an army. They didn't expect to lead an army. They didn't know they were going to lead an army when many of them arrived on Geonosis. They thought they were just running a small rescue mission. But to suddenly have a massive army dropped on them, having an idea of what to do with it is tricky to begin with, but then you add that the Jedi were primarily, organized as pacifists who fought against open conflict, suddenly thrust into the role of battlefield generals. Furthermore, the Republic did have some supply deficiencies, mainly in the presence of proper warships. The lack of things like Venators at the Battle of Geonosis meant that an orbital campaign, while possible and potentially incredibly effective, would have been a bit more of a gamble, because those transports would have been fairly vulnerable in orbit were Separatist warships to arrive. At the end of the day, though, the Battle of Geonosis was one of the most consequential battles in galactic history. It started the Clone Wars. It saw the Separatist crisis boil over into a massive galactic spanning conflict. If you'd like to learn about the Battle of Geonosis and how the battle played out from a sort of top-down view, I'll leave a link up here to my battle analysis on the Battle of Geonosis at the very start of the Clone Wars, so you can sort of see the strategies the Republic used across the plains of Geonosis during that battle. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think I'm overstating the noviceness of the Republic tactics employed during the Battle of Geonosis. Do you think it really was that abhorrent that they just kind of marched their troops across open ground, or do you think it makes sense seeing the type of battle they were fighting and the situations they were in? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars or anywhere else in science fiction, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.